Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Jake and today we are going to be doing a Major League Soccer preseason tier list of potential breakout players in the 2024 season. Here are our four categories. In the most promising category, we have the players with, in my opinion, the highest potential for a breakout season. The next category is youngsters who could break out. This is for young players who are also showing potential for a breakout season, but maybe I can't promise it with the same confidence and stats backing them up. The third category is good to great. This is reserved for players who are already established MLS players who might just take the next step and become must picks in MLS fantasy. The last category is for players who only had half a season last year, but did great with the games they had, and with a full season will hopefully be a standout player. Just a quick side note, this list is for players who aren't already the top players in the league. You won't find Almada or Cucho or Acosta on this list. This list is for new stars that might break out this season. Well, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with the two goalkeepers, Matt Freese and Alex Bono. They each go in the half a season category, as they each only played 10 games. But they impressed with their short seasons. Bono got 6.21 fantasy points per 90 and raised in value from 5.5 to 7.7 mil in that short time. Freese had 6.1 fantasy points per 90 and increased in value from 5.5 to 8 mil. Both keepers look like starters for the 2024 season and will look to have a good full season. Now, let's move on to our defenders. Let's start with Burke Risa. He will go in the half a season category, as he only played 8 games, but he managed to get 6.73 fantasy points per 90 and increase in value from 7 to 8.6 mil. This NYCFC defense started to look really formidable at the end of the 2023 season, pitching 4 shutouts in their last 6 games. Let's see if they can ride that momentum into 2024. Next, we have our first entry in youngsters who could break out, Jalen Neal. He only averaged 5.24 fantasy points per 90 in 16 games, but the young 20-year-old looks like he might be a starter. With some new additions that the Galaxy are making and some players that are coming back from injury, Neal might just have a good year. Now, Ali Ahmed goes in the same category as Neal. I was thinking about putting him in the most promising category, but I wasn't too certain about him, so I'm going to put him in the youngsters who could break out category. The stats love him. He gets 8.19 fantasy points per 90, highest of any defender in the MLS last season. But he only averages about 51 minutes per game. Maybe he'll get more playing time this year and reach his very high ceiling. We've got one more defender in the youngsters who could break out category, and that is Michael Halliday. He came on as a sub more often than not last season, but he managed to pick up 7.12 fantasy points per 90, putting him in the top 10 defenders in the league for this stat. The only question with him is how many minutes a game will he play. He ended last year with a value of only 5.5 mil, so he could be a great value pick early in the season if you see him in the starting lineup. Next are our last two defenders, and our first entries in the good to great category, and that is Teenage Hadebe and Damian Lowe. There we go. Both have shown themselves to be great defenders, but a lack of starts has hurt them. But when they're on the field, they're among the top defenders in the league. Hadebe averaged 6.96 fantasy points per 90, while Lowe had 6.8. If these guys start and stay healthy, you'll want to watch out for them. They might just become must picks. Well, we have made it to the midfielders, and we'll start with a man whose name I cannot pronounce, Saba Lobsanidze. Something like that. He goes into the half a season category, as he only played 9 games, averaging only around 52 minutes per game. He managed to put up massive stats in that short amount of time, however, with 8.87 points per 90, putting him as the 4th best midfielder in the league at this stat. He's another one that his pick value will depend entirely on how often Atlanta start him. Next, we move on to Bernard Kamungo. This 22-year-old had the highest fantasy points per 90 in the entire league at 10. This puts him as the first to go into the most promising category. He averaged about 31 minutes per game, but what he did in those minutes was astounding. He'll find his way into the starting lineup one of these days, and you'd better watch out when he does. He ended last year at 6.2 mil, so he'll likely be a great value pick early if you see his name in the starting 11. Let's do a doubleheader of RSL midfielders. Pablo Ruiz and Diego Luna. Ruiz goes into the good to great category, and Luna goes into the youngsters who could break out category. Now, this might be a little bit of a domestic bias putting two players from my hometown team in this list, but their stats back it up. RSL is going to play more of a possession-based game this season, meaning even more points for Ruiz and Luna. Ruiz averaged 7.18 fantasy points per 90 last season before being sidelined with an injury. He's poised to knock on the door of that top group of elite midfielders who are chalk picks every week. Luna got some starts late in the season, and with the departure of Savarino, there's an open playmaker spot that Luna can fill. The young U.S. international averaged 6.56 fantasy points per 90 last season and looks ready to explode this year. The biggest question is if he'll be played on the wing or as a 10. And last but definitely not least, we have our only forward on this list, Duncan McGuire. He makes the most promising category. He finished third among forwards at fantasy points per 90 with 8.01 behind only Kucho and Bouanga. He only averaged around 46.5 minutes per game, but he looks ready to start and make a big impact this season. He recorded an astounding .90 goals per 90 last season, highest of any player in the league. If the Gauss theorem is correct, which it appears to be, see my last video on the Gauss theorem, then his second season will be even better than the first. He might just be a steal in the early weeks of the season if he's listed with a low monetary value and he shows up in the starting 11. Well, that's it for my tier list. What do you think? Who did I miss? Who would you put in your list? Who on this list do you think doesn't deserve to be here? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to push all the buttons and have a great day. Happy MLS offseason!